You know, people often say that a mother's love is unconditional, that no matter how much pain your children bring you, your heart always finds a way to forgive. I used to believe that. I built my entire life around it. But what no one tells you is that sometimes that very love becomes the weapon that destroys you. I never imagined that the same hands I once held to cross the street would one day push me toward a freezer. That the same boy whose fevered forehead I kissed through sleepless nights would look at me with eyes colder than ice. It didn't happen all at once. Evil rarely does. It creeps in slowly, like frost crawling across a window pane. First, there were little lies about money, then excuses, then silence. Until one day, love turned into a transaction, and I was no longer his mother, just an old woman standing between him and what he thought he deserved. I remember the night it happened. The air was heavy, quiet. He came home with that forced smile, the kind people wear when they've already made up their minds. He told me the freezer downstairs wasn't working right and asked if I could take a look, just for a minute. I should have known something was wrong. A mother always knows, but love makes you blind. When I stepped inside that basement, I didn't see a freezer. I saw frozen moments of every meal I'd cooked, every birthday cake I'd baked, every morning I'd packed his lunch. My whole life was there, hidden in that cold silence. And then I heard the click of the door. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But when I turned and saw the metal handle shaking from the outside, I realized it wasn't. The cold rushed in like betrayal given shape. My breath turned to mist, my fingers trembled, my heart pounded. Not just from fear, but disbelief. How could he? My own son. You'd think that at that moment I would scream. I didn't. Instead, I whispered a prayer. Not for my life, but for his soul. Because what he didn't know was that greed always comes back colder. And it did. What happened next changed everything. For him, for me, for the legacy of a family built on love and shattered by hunger for more. So if you're watching this, stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about a son's betrayal. It's a story about what happens when a mother's silence becomes her strength. And how sometimes, even when the world turns to ice, the truth burns brighter than fire. I've always believed that motherhood is a lifetime contract, one you sign without reading the fine print. From the moment my son was born, I dedicated everything to him. I remember the first time I held him in my arms, so tiny, so fragile, so full of promise. The world seemed infinite, and I promised him I would protect him from everything. And for years, I did. I stayed up at night when he was sick, whispered words of comfort when he had nightmares, cheered louder than anyone when he took his first steps, his first bike ride, his first diploma. Every sacrifice, every tear, every quiet moment of exhaustion, I thought it was love, and I thought it would be enough. But life doesn't follow the script you imagine, does it? As he grew older, I noticed small changes. At first, nothing alarming. A dismissive word here or a rolled eye there. I brushed it off as teenage rebellion. But as the years passed, it became clear that something had shifted. The boy who once clung to me for warmth now seemed to see me as a background fixture, a mother existing only to support his life, to pay for things, to nod and smile when he demanded. I never thought of it as malicious. How could I? He was my son. And yet, there were cracks. I remember the first time he argued over money. I'd given him my credit card for an emergency, and the very next week, he asked for more, insisting I owed him. I felt a pang of worry. Was this normal? Or was something darker growing beneath the surface? I tried to reason with him, to remind him of respect, of gratitude, of kindness, but my words bounced off walls built from entitlement and impatience. Despite all this, I never imagined the worst. I never thought the hands I once held would one day try to harm me. And yet, there were warning signs I ignored, little things that whispered caution. The way he talked over me, the way he dismissed my opinions, the way he made decisions that directly affected me without even asking. All the while, I kept quiet. Mothers often do. We take the pain and silence, believing it's our duty to endure. We reason away every sharp word, every cold glance, every selfish act. But inside, the heart keeps score. The mind remembers. Looking back, I see how easy it was for someone to grow greedy when boundaries are invisible. When a child knows a mother will always give, always forgive, always sacrifice, how quickly respect can morph into expectation, and expectation into entitlement. And then there was the house, my sanctuary. My memories, the place where every birthday, every holiday, every quiet evening had unfolded. A house I had built my life around. A house my son had grown up in. And one day, he told me without hesitation that I was no longer welcome to enjoy it on my own terms. Just watch the house, he said, as if it were a chore, a responsibility I owed him, not a place I had nurtured for decades. The words cut sharper than any knife. I froze, stunned at the audacity. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I had molded, was dismissing me, reducing my home to a task, an obligation. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't just the absence of words. It was a suffocating void where trust had once lived. For a moment, I thought about walking away, about leaving everything behind, quietly, as I always had. But something stirred in me, something quiet, steady, but undeniably strong. A flicker of defiance, of self-respect, of realization that love should not come at the expense of dignity. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom, listening to the familiar creaks of the house, to the echoes of laughter and tears long past. I thought about all the years I had given, all the nights I had stayed awake worrying, all the sacrifices I had made silently. And I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to voice aloud. Have I been living for him, or have I been living for myself? It was the first time in decades I truly considered the possibility that the story could change, that the roles could reverse, and that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to follow the script any longer. The next morning, he would leave, assuming I would sit quietly in my corner, obedient and invisible. But by the time the day ended, everything would be different. That night, as the house settled into silence, I found myself wandering through the rooms, touching the walls as if they could absorb my thoughts, my pain, my disbelief. Each picture, each frame, each faded memory seemed to whisper questions. Why is he like this? Did I fail somewhere? I sank into the sofa, clutching a pillow, and let the tears come, not out of weakness, but from years of silence finally breaking open. I thought back to the day he was born, the first time he grasped my finger, so small, so dependent. I had imagined that love would only grow, that respect would follow naturally. And yet, here I was, Decades later, staring at a son who had transformed into a stranger, one who saw me not as the woman who had carried him through storms, but as a convenience, a resource, a means to an end. The deeper I dwelled on it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just teenage rebellion, or a phase, or even greed alone. It was an entitlement built on a lifetime of unchallenged patterns. I had taught him, even inadvertently, that my boundaries could be bent, my patience tested, my sacrifices expected. And now he was testing the limits I hadn't yet dared to set. I remembered a conversation from years ago. Long before these cracks became canyons, I had warned him gently, "One day you must learn that people are not there to serve you. Respect is earned, not demanded." He laughed then, brushing it off. I thought it was innocent. I realize now it was a seed, a lesson unheeded, growing silently into something dangerous. Sitting there, I began to catalog every moment of neglect, every tiny sting that had been swept under the rug. The birthday was forgotten. The call returned late, dismissively. The promises are broken. And yet,
what hurt the most wasn't any single act. It was the realization that my presence in his life had become invisible, that my love, once a foundation, had been taken for granted. I thought about the house again. The house wasn't just a structure. It was a witness to our lives. It had heard laughter that echoed through hallways, arguments that left bruises on hearts, tears that fell silently in the dead of night. Each room held a fragment of my history, a piece of my identity. And now, he has reduced it to a chore. Just watch the house. My mind began to wander through possibilities, daring, dangerous thoughts I had never entertained before. I remembered reading somewhere that when someone underestimates you, that's when you discover your real power. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to remind him who had raised him, who had built his world brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice.
The night stretched on. Shadows danced across the walls, and I imagined different scenarios, each more audacious than the last. I pictured walking into the wedding, not as the forgotten mother, not as the woman who obeys silently, but as the woman who had shaped his life and would not be erased. I imagined the shock, the gasps, the recognition of the truth he had refused to see. My heart raced at the thought. Was it revenge? Perhaps. Or was it reclamation? The reclaiming of a dignity long deferred, a voice long silenced. Memories surfaced of the small victories, the quiet lessons I had imparted, the stories I had told him when he was too young to understand. Every bedtime story, every lesson in kindness, patience, and resilience now carried weight. They were proof that I had raised him, molded him, taught him, and he could no longer ignore that fact. I began to see patterns in my own life, the way I had always stayed silent when it mattered, the way I had prioritized others' comfort over my own needs. Maybe this was the moment I had been waiting for, a turning point where silence no longer served me, where complacency could no longer be my refuge. But even as determination began to build, doubt crept in. What if he was angry? What if the family turned against me? What if I became the villain in everyone else's eyes? I thought of my friends, my siblings, those who would whisper behind closed doors. And yet, somehow, the fear felt less powerful than the longing for acknowledgement, respect, and justice. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I made a decision, not in anger,
Not in haste, but in quiet resolve. This was my life, my home, my story, and I would step into it fully, without apology. Before I drifted into a restless sleep, a thought lingered in my mind, chilling and thrilling at the same time. By the time he realized what had happened, nothing could be undone. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally be seen, not as a shadow in his life, but as the woman who had raised him, who had loved him, who had built everything he now took for granted. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, everything will change. The morning sunlight spilled softly across the living room, and yet I felt anything but gentle. A quiet storm was building inside me, one I had kept bottled for years. I moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step were a declaration. I was here, I existed, and I would no longer be invisible. I watched him from across the room, my son, so confident, so sure that he held all the cards. He didn't notice me, didn't see the steel behind my calm, and in that invisibility, I found power. The very thing he dismissed as weakness, the thing he thought made me old and irrelevant, would become my strength. I thought back to the years I had poured into him, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the quiet encouragement. Each scraped knee, each heartbreak, each success I had quietly celebrated from the shadows. And now, he had the audacity to tell me to stay away, to be unseen. A pang of hurt rose first, sharp and cold, but it quickly transformed into something fiercer: clarity. I walked to the kitchen, touching the edges of the countertop I had polished countless times. Every groove, every dent, every imperfection carried a memory. His first pancake breakfast, late-night homework sessions, whispered fears shared in the dark. This house, these walls, were witnesses to everything, and I realized something profound. It wasn't just a house, it was my testament. My story is carved in bricks and mortar, in laughter and tears. The idea began to take root. It was audacious, risky, and undeniably thrilling. What if I showed up not as the quietly obedient mother, the one who accepts being sidelined, but as the force he had never truly acknowledged? What if I claimed my presence in the most undeniable way possible? The thought made my pulse race, my fingers tingle, and my heart both ache and soar at the same time. I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened an old trunk, rifling through memories I had stored away. Photos of my son as a baby, his first drawings, letters he had written me with shaky handwriting and heartfelt words. I ran my fingers over them, letting the nostalgia wash over me. I realized then that this wasn't just about confronting him. It was about reclaiming the history we shared, the bond he had tried to ignore, and the dignity I had let slip away unnoticed. The tension gnawed at me. Could I actually do it? Could I walk into that wedding, command attention without shouting, and make him see me for who I was? Not just his mother, but the woman who had shaped him. The doubt was there, a whisper at the edge of my mind, but it grew quieter the more I remembered. I had endured so much. I had survived betrayals, heartbreaks, and silence. What was one more step toward being fully seen?
As I contemplated, I also remembered the warnings from my friends. Be careful, they said. Don't humiliate yourself. Don't make it about revenge. But I wasn't seeking humiliation, and I wasn't chasing revenge. This was about justice, in the quietest, most undeniable form. I was going to show him the weight of love and sacrifice, and the power of being overlooked for too long. By midday, my resolve had crystallized. I began preparing, not in haste, but with a deliberate attention to every detail. The dress I chose, the notes I might carry in my mind, the quiet confidence I would summon. Each choice was a declaration I was stepping into a space where I had been told I didn't belong, and I was doing it on my terms. I paused before leaving the house and looked back at the walls, the furniture, the countless memories stitched into every corner. They had borne witness to my life, and now they bore witness to the next chapter, one where I no longer remained unseen, unheard, or unacknowledged. As I stepped outside, a chill ran through me, both from the crisp air and the enormity of what I was about to do. I thought of him, of the wedding, of the moment when my presence would shatter his assumptions. I pictured the gasps, the stunned faces, the silence that would fall like a curtain, and I smiled quietly to myself, knowing that when the moment came, he would finally see me, not as a background figure, not as someone to be dismissed, but as the woman who had raised him, shaped him, and never truly left his life. But just as I turned the corner toward the car, a thought hit me, a shadow of uncertainty that made my stomach tighten. What if he refused to see me? What if my presence only enraged him? What if everything I had envisioned crumbled before it even began? The answer, I realized, didn't matter yet. All that mattered was that I moved forward, because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for permission, approval, or acknowledgement. I was stepping into the light of my own choosing, and nothing, not fear, not anger, not betrayal, could stop me. As I drove toward the wedding venue, my hands clenched the steering wheel, not out of anger, but anticipation. I could feel the energy of change, of confrontation, of revelation, coursing through me. Tomorrow, the world would witness what I had known all along, that a mother's love, her sacrifices, and her presence cannot be erased, no matter how hard someone tries. And in that anticipation, I found a thrill I hadn't felt in decades. The moment was coming, the revelation was near, and the life I had quietly endured for so long was about to bloom into something undeniable. By the time I reached the edge of the parking lot, my heart pounded like a drum. Every nerve screamed, every memory surged, and every ounce of preparation condensed into a single truth. He would see me. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same again. As I stepped out of the car, I caught a glimpse of the wedding hall through the glass doors. My son was inside, laughing, unaware that the woman he had dismissed, the woman who had given him everything, was about to enter and change everything. I took a deep breath and stepped through the glass doors, feeling every eye turn toward me. The chatter froze mid-word, laughter faltered, and a hush spread across the room. I saw my son, standing there, smiling at his friends, completely unaware of what was about to hit him. The same boy I had rocked to sleep, patched up after his first scraped knees, and whispered encouragement to in the dead of night, now looked at me as if I were a stranger. For a heartbeat, I hesitated. The magnitude of the moment pressed down on me, heavy and electric. But then I remembered all the years of quiet endurance, the sacrifices no one acknowledged, the moments I had been invisible in my own home, and I walked forward. Step by step, deliberate, graceful, unstoppable. People gasped. Some whispered. I could see the flicker of recognition cross my son's face, a flash of memory, a jolt of familiarity. but it was tinged with disbelief. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to stop me, but I didn't wait for permission. I was no longer waiting for validation from anyone. I moved past the crowd, feeling the weight of decades in every step. The memories of his childhood pressed against me. Birthday cakes, scraped knees, late-night homework, whispered fears and dreams shared under blankets of soft lamplight. Every memory whispered, "This is your time. This is your moment to be seen." He froze as I reached him, his eyes wide, his jaw tight. I looked into those familiar eyes, not with anger, but with calm certainty. "Hello," I said softly, letting my voice carry across the room. "I'm here, and I always will be." The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. People didn't know where to look. At me, at him, at the invisible threads of tension that now crackled in the air. I could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for the storm or the reconciliation. But this wasn't about a scene. It was about truth. I shared a few words about the journey we had walked together, the years of guidance, the sacrifices, the love that had gone unseen. I didn't accuse, I didn't shout. I simply told the truth, clear, firm, and undeniable. My son shifted uncomfortably, the mask of superiority slipping, revealing glimpses of guilt, shame, and the faintest recognition of what he had taken for granted. And then I handed him a small envelope. Inside were letters I had written over the years, letters he had never received, thoughts I had never voiced, memories I had tucked away to protect him. Each note carried my love, my disappointment, my hope. He looked at them as if he were seeing a part of me for the very first time, a part he had overlooked for too long.
Some friends murmured, some cried softly, and some simply stared. The wedding, once a place of celebration, had transformed into a theater of revelation. I watched as my son's hands trembled, the words caught in his throat, the pride he had carried so fiercely unraveling in an instant. In that moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about him. It was about every woman who had ever been told to step aside, to be quiet, to fade. My presence, my courage, my decision to step in and reclaim my space wasn't only for me. It was a message to the world that we cannot be erased, ignored, or diminished simply because others fail to recognize our worth. The ceremony continued around us, but I felt the shift in energy, the subtle acknowledgement of my power. I wasn't there to ruin anyone's day. I was there to assert existence, to claim recognition, to show that love and sacrifice are not debts to be ignored. Later, after the initial shock faded, a few guests approached me. Some hugged me, tears glistening in their eyes, whispering words I had longed to hear. "You are brave. You showed us all what love really means. We see you now, finally." Their gratitude and acknowledgement wrapped around me like a warm quilt, softening the tension in my chest and filling me with an unspoken triumph.
My son eventually found his voice, a mixture of regret and hesitation. But I didn't respond with anger. I responded with a gentle, unwavering presence, letting him face the reality of the choices he had made, the moments he had overlooked, and the love he had taken for granted. The power wasn't in my words. It was in my calm certainty, my dignified resolve, and the undeniable fact that I had arrived fully, unapologetically, and with my truth intact. As the day drew to a close, I slipped out quietly, leaving behind whispers, glances, and an indelible memory that would linger far longer than the festivities. The wedding had gone on, but something had changed, not just in him, but in the energy of the room, in the awareness of everyone present. My presence had shifted the narrative, turned the tide, and reminded everyone that love and courage are never to be dismissed. And as I walked to my car, heart racing with exhilaration and relief, I realized the truth. The most profound moments are not the ones we plan, but the ones we step into with courage, conviction, and unwavering authenticity. That wedding, which had once been a place of exclusion, became the stage for revelation, redemption, and recognition. And I, quietly, had written the first lines of a new story. As I drove away from the hall, I felt the faintest tremor in my heart, a message waiting for me in the form of a phone call, a knock, or a note. Something was coming, something that would extend the ripples of this day far beyond the walls of that room. After the whirlwind of the wedding settled, I finally allowed myself a quiet evening alone. The house was still, the lights dimmed, and the echoes of the day's events drifted through the rooms like a soft, lingering fog. I sat in my favorite chair, the one by the window where sunlight used to stream in each morning, and I let my thoughts wander. What had just happened was more than a confrontation, more than a spectacle. It was a revelation, not just to my son, but to myself. I realized then that life has a strange way of showing us our own strength. We often underestimate what we are capable of, thinking that silence or patience is the measure of our worth. But courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the quiet decisions we make, the boundaries we assert, and the dignity we refuse to surrender. I had shown up, not to shame or punish, but to reclaim a space that had always been mine, to remind myself and others that our presence matters, even when overlooked. The days that followed were filled with unexpected messages and visits. Friends from long ago reached out, some with tears, others with laughter. "I never had the courage," they said, "but seeing you today made me believe it's never too late." One woman told me she had been estranged from her family for years, feeling invisible and unheard. After witnessing my quiet assertion, she had called her daughter, shared her heart, and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Each story I heard became a mirror of my own journey, reflecting resilience I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I started to notice subtle shifts in my son, too. Not apologies or grand gestures were needed, but small changes, tiny acknowledgments, moments of hesitancy before he spoke as if he were measuring his words against the truth I had laid bare. Sometimes it felt like a slow dance of realization, a process where understanding tiptoed in, unannounced but inevitable. And then I began writing again. Not letters I would send, not messages to anyone in particular, but journals filled with reflections, memories, and lessons. I wrote about the early days of motherhood, the quiet sacrifices no one noticed, the moments of laughter and fear, love and heartbreak. Writing became my sanctuary, a space to organize the chaos of emotions and turn them into clarity. It reminded me that our stories, when told authentically, hold power. They heal not only ourselves, but those who stumble upon them.
I thought a lot about what this all meant for women, for mothers, for anyone who has been told they are too much, too old, too quiet, too invisible. Our strength is often hidden behind smiles, behind patience, behind quiet endurance. And yet, it is there, ancient, unyielding, and beautiful. It waits for us to claim it, to assert it, to live it fully. When we do, it has the power to shift not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us. Sometimes at night, I walk through my small garden, feeling the cool earth beneath my fingers, smelling the faint fragrance of roses and jasmine. I think about the house, the wedding, the decisions I made. Each choice, each step, each act of courage has led me here to a place where freedom and dignity coexist. I am no longer waiting for permission, no longer shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. I am alive, fully and unapologetically, and that is its own quiet triumph. I also realize that forgiveness is not the absence of justice. It is a gift we give ourselves. I don't need my son to fully understand or even to appreciate my presence that day. What matters is that I acted in alignment with my truth. In doing so, I freed myself from the burden of invisibility, from the weight of neglect, and from the unspoken expectation that love must always be silent. In reflecting on these events, I saw a pattern. Life rarely hands us justice neatly packaged. It hands us choices, opportunities to assert ourselves, and moments that test the boundaries of courage. How we respond defines not only our path forward, but the legacy we leave. For me, stepping into that wedding wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reclamation. It was a statement that no amount of disregard can erase the value of a life lived fully and intentionally. I started sharing my experiences with small circles, neighbors, friends, even a few family members willing to listen. The conversations weren't about blame or guilt. They were about visibility, dignity, and the quiet power of presence. People began to open up, sharing their own stories of marginalization, neglect, and resilience. And in those moments, I saw a new community forming, one where strength is recognized, courage is celebrated, and silence is no longer demanded. As the weeks turned into months, life settled into a rhythm of its own. I traveled a little, revisited old friends, and embraced hobbies that had been neglected for decades. I found joy in small things, a morning sunrise, a freshly brewed cup of tea, the laughter of my grandchildren. And yet, the wedding remained a pivotal point in my memory, a reminder of what can happen when we refuse to be invisible, when we step into our own power. The lesson I carry with me now is simple, yet profound. Never let anyone dictate your worth, your presence, or your voice. Age is not a limitation, neglect is not a sentence, and love, the kind that nurtures and endures, is never truly forgotten. When we claim our space, when we speak our truth, we create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. And so, as I sit in my quiet home, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors too beautiful for words, I smile. The past, with its wounds and misunderstandings, has shaped me, but it does not define me. The future is mine, rich with possibility, dignity, and the quiet triumph of a woman who chose to be seen, finally, fully, and without apology. And somewhere in the echoes of that wedding hall, a message waits. Perhaps it's a conversation yet to be had. Perhaps it's reconciliation. Or perhaps it's the next unexpected twist, a reminder that life's lessons, when lived bravely, are never truly finished.
As the sun set behind the hills that framed my little town, I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet wash over me. The wedding was over. The tension, the words, the hidden glances, and the unspoken resentments had all settled into memory. And yet the feeling that lingered wasn't bitterness. It was something softer, stronger, a quiet, unshakable sense of self. I thought about my son, about the life we had shared, the years of raising him, the sleepless nights, the laughter, and even the tears. I realized that love is not always acknowledged at the moment. Sometimes it's a slow-burning ember that warms the heart long after the flames of anger or hurt have faded. Showing up at that wedding wasn't just about him. It was about me reclaiming my story, my presence, my dignity. It was about proving, not to anyone else, but to myself, that I mattered. Over the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes in the people around me. Friends reached out more openly, sharing their own hidden struggles and triumphs. I heard stories of mothers and grandmothers who had been overlooked, silenced, or dismissed, women who found courage in my example. Each conversation reminded me that the choices we make, the small acts of bravery we dare to take, can ripple outward in ways we never imagined. What we see as a personal victory can quietly inspire others to find their own strength. And yet, not everyone understood. There were whispers, judgments, and questions about why I had chosen such a bold, unconventional path. Some said I had embarrassed my family. Others wondered if I had acted out of anger or revenge. But I knew the truth. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about living in alignment with who I am, about honoring the decades of patience, love, and resilience that had carried me this far. And in doing so, I had found a peace I hadn't known I was capable of. Life, I realized, is rarely fair in the ways we hope it will be. We are not always acknowledged in our sacrifices. We are not always celebrated for our quiet endurance. But that doesn't diminish the value of our journey, nor does it erase the impact we have on the world around us. Our strength is not measured by applause or recognition, but by the courage we summon when no one is watching. It is measured by the grace with which we reclaim our lives, even when the world tells us we are too late, too old, too insignificant. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my own world, piece by piece. I traveled a few short trips that reminded me the world was vast, full of possibility, and waiting for me to explore it. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, shared stories over coffee and laughter, and allowed myself to feel joy without guilt. My home, my sanctuary, became a reflection of who I was, not what I had been told to be. Each day, each choice, each quiet victory added up to something profound. Freedom. I also learned the most important lesson of all, that forgiveness, for myself and others, is not a surrender, it is a gift. It does not erase the past, but it allows the present to be lived fully, honestly, and without fear. I forgave my son not because his actions were justified, but because my own peace mattered more than holding on to anger. I forgave the circumstances that tried to diminish me because I refused to let them define the rest of my life. And in that forgiveness, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a quiet, enduring power that no one could ever take away. To anyone listening to this story, especially women who feel overlooked, silenced, or underestimated, your time is not past. Your value is not diminished by age, circumstance, or the judgments of others. You have a voice that deserves to be heard, a life that deserves to be lived fully, and a heart that deserves to feel its own worth. It is never too late to reclaim yourself, to assert your presence, to show the world and yourself the power of a life lived authentically. So, as I sit here now, surrounded by memories, light, and the faint hum of life outside my window, I smile. The wedding, the judgments, the doubts are all part of a larger story, one that has led me to this moment of clarity. I am no longer defined by others' expectations. I am no longer shrinking to fit someone else's vision of who I should be. I am fully, completely, and unapologetically myself. And that, I realize, is the most beautiful victory of all. If you enjoyed this story and want to witness more real-life tales of resilience, courage, and transformation, make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Silent Truths.
Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below.
And don't miss the next story coming soon, where we uncover yet another extraordinary journey of strength, love, and life's unexpected twists. Remember, it's never too late to step into your own power, to live for yourself, and to show the world the incredible strength you hold within.